Welcome, fellow members, to this new form of communication at the Royal St. Lawrence. My name is Jacques Boucher, Commodore of the club, and I have the distinct pleasure of hosting this session. This is the first event in our new podcast series, which will be integrated into the newsletter. We hope you find this format interesting and enjoy the journey with us. The newsletter will provide more info about our podcast series. Today's topic is one of the most important springtime rituals of our club: how to prepare your boat for launch. Joining me in this discussion will be our very esteemed and experienced yard manager, David Fleet. Welcome, David, to our Royal St. Lawrence Yacht Club podcast. I'm delighted you could join us and impart to our members your knowledge and expertise. Let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, your sojourn at the Yacht Club.
Hi, Jacques. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this first podcast. I started at the club in 1973, so this is my 48th launch. I was the general manager from 1993 until 2016, and the boating part was my beginning at the club. I'm fortunate that as assistant general manager and yard manager now, I'm still messing around with the boats.
Well, you're with us, David, and it's because you do a fine job at it. Now, you have a crew that works for us. What size is your crew, and who are some of the key individuals?
Well, I wanted to mention Dave Gillis was our foreman for the last 40 years. And last spring, we had quite a change. He'd had an accident in the fall of 2019. And after 40 years as our lift driver, he wasn't able to work. Dave had surgery in March. He's recovering quite well, but it's unlikely that he's not going to be able to return. So for the crew we have now, Jeff Adams was training with Dave for a couple seasons, and he took over last year driving in the spring, and he's been doing really, really well. We've got a good crew this year, led by Ryan Amy with Jeff. We also have Greg, Jean, Sonny, George, Rico. And last spring was the first time that any of these guys had been involved in launching boats. So the only returning staff we had last year was Ryan and Jeff. And we also have two students, Will and Nick, and they're going to be back. It'll be third and second summer for them. So we'll have some continuity this year.
Could you give us information on the docks we have in the harbor presently? We have different methods of construction over the years. We build some docks, and this year we bought a whole extension for Hines. How about you tell us about the materials and the way we build docks and the ones that we bought this year?
So the vast majority of the docks at the club are docks we've built over the winter, and it was an important part of the staffing process, being able to have people year-round at work and produce the docks as we needed them. But as the environmental requirements have changed for the pressure treating of wood, the lifespan of the wood shortened. So a few years ago, we started looking at alternate means, and maybe it was fortunate that we did. When you look at what's happened to the lumber prices, anybody that's trying to do any kind of work with wood knows that the wood has just soared in cost. So last year we started working with some galvanized frames. We did a couple of models with that. And with the COVID, it was a bit delayed getting them back from the galvanizing. And this year we decided to go with a commercial aluminum dock. They just arrived. I mean, the first sections only arrived last week. And it's a little bit of a different technology. And we've got a few little adjustments we're making going forward. But hopefully most of them will be in their basic position by the end of this week.
It's quite a process. I know that in the fall we detach docks and prepare the harbor to handle the freeze and the ice. When do you start thinking about reinstalling, and what are the phases to reinstall the docks, reattach them to land?
Well, we start thinking about it as soon as we get them out. But the average for the harbor crew, the season begins when the ice leaves the harbor, and that's, in my lifetime, been around April 12th. So this year we're really, really early with our start. All the docks get moved in the fall before freeze up so they don't get damaged. The water goes up and down over the winter, and if the docks were in their natural positions, they would be broken by the ice. So they all have to be repositioned and then secured for the summer. And that's a real solid 2 weeks of work with everything going well. And what doesn't go well, and what's not evident, if you're at the club on a bright sunny day polishing your boat, you don't realize how high water and rain and high winds can affect. It's dangerous out there putting those docks in. So there's the weather's conditions. Mother Nature is what's going to tell us when we can be ready. This year we're adding 22 new spots on Hines, who I was talking about before, and we have a couple of other adjustments we started in the fall. Because we hauled early because of COVID, there was a bit of an opportunity to do a little more than we normally have time for. And we tried repositioning some piles to make a few of the spots for the larger boats have a bit more space in them.
Let's move from the docks now about the methods of moving the boat. What is our main medium or vehicle for moving the boats? Well, everybody knows it's travel lift, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about the machine, when we purchased it, when we installed the ramps.
So we have a 35-ton Acme hoist. I think we bought that in 1993. And it's a much nicer machine than the first generation that we had, and it's performed extremely well.
So you say that it lifts 35 tons, that's 70,000 pounds. When you're handling and moving boats that weigh that much, what are the main safety guidelines that members should observe during boatyard preparation work and launching?
Well, nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. So you got to stay out from under the boat when we're moving it. And the driver can only see on his side of the lift. He's depending on the guys around him. They're trying to make sure the travel lift doesn't hit anything. And please just stay out from under the boat. If there's something you need to do on the boat, little preparation, the last thing, talk to Jeff before the boat is lifted. He'll let you know when he's going to stop and when it's time for you to go underneath. So just stay in eye contact with Jeff. Watch for his clue. He'll let you know when you can go. And another thing is, nobody can ride on the boat when it's in the travel lift. If anything should happen in the boat fall, we don't want anybody getting hurt. So everybody needs to be off the boat before the boat gets lifted.
Now I know that we have a full harbor this year, and there are new members that are obviously going to new spots. What would a member have to do to prepare his docking or his or her docking location when ready for launch?
Take a walk out to your dock, have a look at it before you head over with the boat. A lot of members install bumpers. You want to make sure that they've survived the winter well, that your mooring lines that you might have left on the dock in the fall are there and are in good shape. Just make sure everything is secure and intact. There is a reminder this year, try and make sure your power lines are not dangling in the water.
Thank you. What are major items our members should focus on to be ready for their boat's spring launch? I imagine bumpers. You want to go over some, maybe there's a checklist you have in mind? Or
when you're preparing the boat for launch, you want to have your lines and fenders, your lines secured on deck and your fenders ready. Most of the boats power out of the travel lift, but in certain conditions, if it's too windy or there's a mechanical problem, we'll walk you out. And you're going to need lines when you get to the dock. So have the lines ready on the deck, secured to the cleats. It just saves us some time.
And just to go back to the docking location, members could also have their lines there ready for the boat also.
Yeah, a lot of people have their lines, most people leave permanent lines on the dock.
I like to think of us as a community and all, we all love yachting and our boats. Is there any difference between a power boat and a sailboat in terms of launch preparation?
I think most people now are using mechanics to do, particularly with the larger boats, to do the preparation. Cosmetic preparation and waxing, painting is stuff that a number of members still do. It's not something that shows, but you want to remember if you've got a plug in the keel or in the transom, it's a good thing to check the plug is in and snug.
I know about that, David. When I purchased my boat last year, they launched it and they forgot to put the plug. So that was a surprise.
Many people have that surprise.
Okay. Let's look at the day of the launch here. So the day is here, has arrived. Your appointment, 8:30 in the morning, let's say, be there. Should members arrive early? Should they talk to you before the boat is launched, before the procedure starts? You want to give us an idea of how the timeline during that day or that appointment?
The appointment time that I give you is when I expect the machine is going to be lifting your boat. So that's not the time to be pulling into the parking lot. We're very punctual unless there's a problem with the machine or somebody else stuck in traffic and we're delayed for whatever reason. So we tend to run early. So, it helps for the end of the day if there's somebody needs to get hauled out or something that surprise opportunity to get a smaller boat in or something. It's great if you're on time or a bit early. It just gives the day a little bit of a buffer. And please park your car out of the way. And it's not just out of the way of your boat. Remember that we're going to continue launching after you. And the travel lift is big and wide and it needs lots of space. So if you need to unload something close to your boat, unload, but then please make sure your car is parked where it's not going to block anybody.
So arrive early, perhaps as much as a half an hour. Keep your car out of the way of the launching area or the maneuvering area of the travel lift. That's great. Should members invite extra help for that day? Like, does the crew help them, or tell us about that?
Yeah, it's best to have somebody with you so that when you leave, you can get to your dock on your own. We don't really have someone dedicated to that task. If you're stuck, we're going to try and help you, but we're also going to try and stay on schedule. So if you can be autonomous, bring somebody with you that you can get over to the dock, that'd be great.
Okay, David, the boat is in the sling. It's slowly being lowered into the water. What is important at that point?
Well, once we get the boat close to the water line, Jeff's going to stop and let you get aboard. Once you're aboard, you can start the blowers and take the time you need then to check for leaks. An extra minute in the slings is pretty easy compared to a panic trying to get back in after you've been released and you notice you got a leak. So take a minute or two, let the engines warm up till you got a good idle. And then once you check for leaks and the engine's idling, you can let us know when you're ready to be released. But let the crew know, because the slings still have to be lowered sufficiently to get under the boat. And Jeff will let you know when the slings are low enough so that you can drive out from the lift.
Okay. And then the member is off to his docking slip.
Off to your slip.
Presumably the lines are ready, and so he ties himself up properly and he verifies there. So is there any additional safety tips that you would have for the whole process?
Yeah, well, when you get over to the docks, if you've got steel piles at the back of the dock, it's always a good idea to have a stern line onto the piles. Often it's an idyllic day when you arrive, but every day isn't perfect, and you want the boat secure. So the steel piles are what's going to keep your boat in place. Most of the boats have piles. If you're on Forbes and Hines, the floating docks, there's probably a ring on the side of the main dock in front of you that'll let you get a bow line on an angle away from the finger pier. It just gives a little bit of tension away from the dock if the wind is on that side of your boat. So people don't always notice or remember that. You might want to take a look for that. A couple other things maybe while your boat is still in the yard, you might want to have a look around where the boat was and make sure you're leaving the area tidy, because other members are going to notice if you left a mess. And I encourage people, don't leave anything on the cradle. Once you're off the cradle, that cradle is going to get moved a half a dozen or more times until you're back on it in the fall. And if you leave ladders and boards and plastic pipe, the tractor has to handle the cradles, and it's flying through the air at a 45-degree angle. Stuff isn't going to stay on there, and people always come back disappointed because their ladder's bent or their wood is missing. It doesn't belong on the cradle. So please, if you've got stuff, remove it so it doesn't get damaged.
Anything else you want to add, David? I think we've gone through the cycle here.
You want to make sure that you have adequate sized lines, and maybe you need to check in before you launch. When you're preparing the boat, check that you have adequate lines before you're launched. When you're at the dock, grab the side of the boat, give it a push and pull back and forth, and you can see if your spring lines are going to keep your boat in the right position so your fenders will stay where they're doing their work. And it's not always as calm as when you're standing on the dock, so you want to know your fenders stay in place. And another thing I've noticed increasingly, people don't put fenders on the other side of the boat, the side away from the finger pier. And you should have your fenders in there, just in case your neighbor comes in. If he's only got 2 fenders down and you've got no fenders down and the wind is wrong, you're probably going to have a scratch. So protect yourself. Put a couple fenders on the other side of your boat also.
Can we just talk about the docking lines, David? You recommend a bow and a stern line, and perhaps 2 spring lines?
Yeah, a couple of spring lines. But you got to check the position. And the only way I find that I know when I'm checking a boat in a storm is I pull the boat from the back, pull it forward, from the front, pull it backward, and see how it twists, and see if you can adjust the lines to keep it as much parallel the dock and the fenders in the right position between the boat and the dock. It's never been boring, and I've met a lot of great people here over the years, and I'm looking forward to meeting many more.
Okay. Well, David, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and insight with us today. I'm sure all members will find this very useful. In closing, I hope this podcast was interesting and provided you with more complete information in a different format. When launching our boats, the safety of our members and the yard crew is always paramount. After all, we are at our club to enjoy the moment, not make it stressful. If you take the time to prepare, things should go smoothly. Rest assured that David and his very competent crew are there to answer your questions and help you launch your boat successfully. As for me, it was a pleasure to host this first podcast. Enjoy a great yachting season at our club. And on behalf of the communication team that made this possible, thank you very much for listening.